Welcome to Everyday Martial Artist, a weekly podcast where you'll join me, Brian Doucette, as I interview a different martial artist each episode and hear their story. Some guests you may have heard of, and some you probably haven't. Be sure to subscribe where all your favorite podcasts are available. Also visit our website at everydaymartialartist.com. If you're listening for a specific interview, I sure hope you'll stay and check out the other episodes. A very special thank you to Topher Williams for our custom theme music. And now, the newest episode of Everyday Martial Artist. Everyday Martial Artist is brought to you by KOOnline.com for all your martial arts needs. Sparring and safety gear, rank belts, uniforms, weapons, patches, and more. Wholesale supplies made by martial artists for martial artists. Visit us today at ko-online.com. Hey, business leaders, want your audience more focused than a monk in a staring contest? Want them grinning bigger than when they found out their in-laws aren't coming for Christmas? Then you need the amazing Arthur Fratelli. Arthur is a TEDx speaker, Last Comic Standing alum, and lifelong martial artist, traveling the country, captivating audiences at conferences, corporate events, and schools. His high-energy keynotes blend failure, focus, and flow with comedy, magic, and jaw-dropping skill. Facts fade, but stories stick, and Arthur delivers a TEDx-worthy experience they'll never forget. Book now at theamazingarthur.com, because your event deserves more energy than a caffeine-fueled ninja. Hello and welcome to Everyday Martial Artist. I'm your host, Brian Doucette, and as we do every week, we're joined by a brand new guest talking about their life and their journey throughout the martial arts and other stuff they're involved in. My guest today started wrestling at a young age and competed in over 400 matches over 11 years. In 1994, he found Greg Nelson's Minnesota Martial Arts Academy and began to practice Judo, boxing, Shootfighting, and Muay Thai. Had his first MMA match in 1999, has fought in the UFC PRIDE and more, and is a former UFC Lightweight Champion. He's married and has 2 sons. Please welcome my guest today, Mr. Sean Sherk. How you doing today, sir?
I'm good. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. I truly appreciate your time. I know how busy people are, so anytime they're willing to take some time out of their schedule and do this, I truly appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
I mentioned in the intro that you started wrestling at a young age. First of all, was that your first experience with any type of martial arts and combat sports at all? And if so, what led you to it? At that age, I think I read 7 years old. Was it your choice? Was it your parents' choice? Just kind of, how did that start for you?
Yeah, I guess, there really was no such thing as martial arts or mixed martial arts when I was young. So wrestling would be considered a martial art now, of course, but back when I was younger, it was not. So, coming from a wrestling family, we have wrestling lineage in our family all the way back to my grandfather, maybe even further.
Wow.
Grandfather, my dad, aunts and uncles, not aunts, gosh darn it, my uncles. Yeah, there was no women's wrestling back in the 1950s. But, my uncles, all my cousins, my brothers. So wrestling was just kind of what we did as Sherks. And my dad put me in it at 7 years old. I was just a high-strung, hyper kid, aggressive. So he just felt like wrestling would be a good fit, and fortunately it was.
Was it 7? Did I have that right? At that age when you started?
Yeah, I started at 7. I was in 2nd grade.
Wow.
Yep.
See, I don't think, like, my hometown, I didn't wrestle, but I had friends that did, and I don't remember it starting that young. So I don't know, maybe it depended on the area, but I don't remember it being an option at that age, and most of it didn't start till middle school. So
yeah. I mean, where I'm at, it was, there was kids that were starting at 4 and 5 years old. So even at 7 years old, I remember my first wrestling match.
You do?
I remember my first couple. I lost my first 2 or 3 in a row, and I got pinned in like 10, 15, 20 seconds. Like, that's how long my first couple matches lasted, because I had no technique, tons of athletic ability, naturally strong, great balance, but zero technique because it was my first year. Well, the kids I was wrestling, it was already their 2nd or 3rd year at 7 years old. Okay. And they just put the hammer down. So yeah, I lost my first couple matches in a row, and I realized in a real hurry that I don't like losing. So I started getting a lot more aggressive, and actually ended up taking 2nd state my very first year.
Oh wow. Okay, so that competitive nature started very young and kicked in.
I just got really mean and really aggressive. So where I lacked in technique, I made up for in athleticism and intensity.
So back then, now, was that the only sport you did, or was it only during wrestling season you did other sports, or was that a year-round thing for you? How did that go?
Well, there was really no such thing as year-round wrestling at this time and day.
Mm-hmm.
Now there is.
Yeah.
In order to win a high school state title, now you have to wrestle year-round, pretty much from the time that you're in elementary school all the way up and through high school to win a state title nowadays. So just the competition level has gone up substantially. But yeah, back in my day, I started off just wrestling, and that's the only sport I played. Just maybe 4 months out of the year, probably.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started playing football. Let me back up a little bit. I started playing baseball in middle school.
Okay.
Then I started playing football in high school. Baseball and football I added to the repertoire, but I only played baseball for a few years, and I only played football for a few years as well. So wrestling is the one that always stuck because that's what I was the best at.
I'm trying to picture with how I know you're built and stuff. Were you a shortstop in baseball?
I actually played outfield.
Really?
I was a decent baseball player. I wasn't
Yeah.
great by any means, but we used to play front yard baseball all summer long with me and my buddies, and of course I played on a team as well. So I was decent. I wasn't great, so I wasn't playing on the infield or anything like that. And same thing with football. I mean, I was a good football player, but I was small.
Okay.
In ninth grade, I weighed 95 pounds.
Wow.
Can you imagine a 95-pound linebacker?
Wow.
So I didn't have the size, and 5'2", 95 pounds, and I could tackle the biggest dudes and, on the field because I was a really good wrestler, but the coach wouldn't even give me a shot, wouldn't even put me on the starting lineup. So I was always a second stringer. And the only time I saw the field was, if we had a really big lead going into the fourth quarter, I might get a couple plays, but otherwise I was just a bench warmer more or less. And again, that wasn't my style. I mean, I didn't want to sit and watch everybody else play. I wanted to play. So football didn't last very long either.
Oh, okay. Throughout high school, then the wrestling was the one you obviously focused on the most.
Started when I was 7. I wrestled till I was 19. So wrestling was my main focus. Yep.
And how did it go in high school? Did you make it to state at all? I know Minnesota's got tough wrestling competition even back then.
Yeah, I placed the state tournament every year.
Nice.
All the way through high school. So I didn't wrestle my junior year. I ended up getting bad grades, and I got kicked off the team, which is just dumb. But it's all part of my story. It's all part of my story now, and I was able to use that situation as motivation over the years. Otherwise, I placed at the high school state tournament as a sophomore and as a senior. Mm-hmm. And then I placed a freestyle state tournament every year from 7 years old all the way up until 9th or 10th grade.
Okay.
So I placed in the state tournament every year and placed at some national tournaments too. So
nice.
I was a good wrestler.
Did you ever come? I don't know if it happened back then, but I know up here and where I'm up in Moorhead now near Fargo, and we have that Rumble on the Red huge wrestling tournament at the Fargo Dome. Did they have that back then?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, I was one of the first guys from my hometown to go there.
Really?
And oh boy, I was there 3 times. I think I took second, first.
Okay.
And the year I took second, I lost to a kid from Canada. There used to be kids from Canada that used to come down for that tournament.
Wow.
Boy, JJ Jackson. I don't know how in the world I remember that name. But yeah, the guy's name, JJ Jackson from Canada, beat me and kept me from getting a three-peat at Fargo. So, but yeah, that tournament was around, and it was always tough.
Yeah, it's huge. I know it's always a big
now
deal.
It is. Yeah.
I've been to it once, just when I worked at a radio station. I got to go there just to hang out for a day and stuff. And this was like 15 years ago, and it's huge then. So I've heard it's gotten bigger. So
yeah, my boys have been wrestling that tournament ever since they've been in elementary school.
That's cool.
My youngest won it 3 times, I believe, and then he took third last year as a senior in high school. He took third, lost to a 3-time state champ from North or South Dakota. I don't remember which one, but yeah. So he won it a few times as well.
Nice. What are your thoughts then on Minnesota now added girls wrestling to high school a few years back, and which is growing fast? Have you got to watch any of that, and are you a fan of that?
Yeah, they have girls wrestling at the high school state tournament, so they intermix it with the boys. Mm-hmm. And every now and then you'll see really, really high-level girls. You'll see 1 or 2 every year that actually compete with the boys because they're so good. Then they have the option, obviously, to have their own girls state tournament as well. So, I mean, I think it's great for the girls, and it's good for the sport, and it's going to help the sport grow.
Yeah, definitely.
That's what we're looking for. We're looking for big support, and we're looking for growth. And then, now my kids are in college. So this last year, we got to watch some of the girls' college wrestlers.
Nice.
And those girls are good, man. Those girls are tough. And it's funny to see, the ability of the high school girls compared to the ability of the college girls.
Yeah.
These girls can wrestle. I'm telling you, if these girls, they ever have a boyfriend, get out of line with them. Those boys are in some trouble because they're going to get a whoop ass.
That's awesome. I know one of the side gigs I do sports PA announcing. I announce like college basketball, college softball, college volleyball, but I've also announced some college wrestling, some D1 and I got to announce the D3 NCAA regionals a few years back. And I actually announced some NDSU wrestling 2 years ago, I think, when they wrestled Oklahoma. And the one big difference, I'm curious, did you, at the levels you wrestle at, did you ever have to deal with the riding time? I know they don't have it in high school yet in Minnesota, but I know they have it in college. Did you ever have to deal with that?
When I was competing, I never competed in college. I only competed till I was 19.
Okay.
I got scholarship offers from some really good schools, but my grades weren't very good, and my head was up my ass. I'll be honest with you. My head was up my ass when I was younger, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do with myself. So I kind of pissed away my college wrestling experience because of that reason. Again, I was able to use that as motivation later on in life. Those mistakes, you use those as a motivation, obviously, and that was another one of my motivating factors, was the fact that I kind of blew my chances of going to college. And, as far as ride time goes, I don't know how long that's been around for, because like I said, I didn't compete in college, but my boys did this year, and I watch a lot of college wrestling. I've been watching college wrestling for 20 years.
Nice.
But my boys did, and they love the ride time. You get rewarded for being able to control the other wrestler and stay on top.
Yeah, for me it was new. I had never, because I grew up watching high school wrestling because I had cousins that wrestled. My sister was a wrestling cheerleader in my hometown. But my first time ever seeing riding time was the first time I announced D3 college wrestling. I'm like, it's what? And they had to explain it to me what it was, and it was, when you've never seen it before, it's a little confusing. But yeah, it definitely makes sense. And now, do you think it would make sense to add that in high school, or could you see that happening?
I would be supportive of it. What they're trying to do is they're trying to benefit the offensive wrestler.
Mm-hmm.
With the 2-point takedown and a 1-point escape is the way it used to be. Now it's a 3-point takedown, 1-point escape. So with a 2-point takedown, 1-point escape, the offensive wrestler doesn't get the reward that they get for, putting points on the board.
Right.
So they had that 3-point takedown. So now they can make some more space and create some more gap between the guy who's being offensive and the guys who's not. So I would support it, definitely.
Nice. Yeah, me too. I'm hoping.
I like that.
I've talked to a few of the Section 8 and Section 6, directors of the regions and stuff, and it sounds like some coaches are supporting it. So I don't know if it'll ever go for a vote or not, but
maybe it will. And
fingers crossed.
One thing is too they say the hardest crossover from a high school wrestler to a college wrestler is the ability to ride.
Yeah. Because
in high school you don't get rewarded for it, so people don't really focus on it. They just cut you loose and take you down, especially the high level guys.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the guys, they have a hard time crossing over onto the ability to ride their opponent. So adding ride time to high school would actually put more emphasis on learning how to ride people.
So hopefully, keep my eyes open for it. But
yeah.
So then you wrestled till 19. So at what age and kind of what led you to decide to actually study more martial arts, and kind of what led you to the Minnesota Martial Arts Academy and Greg Nelson?
Well, I saw my first UFC, and a lot of people my era would say the same thing. Their motivating factor was watching the very first or first or second UFC event. And watching that event, I just thought it was the coolest thing in the world. Seeing these karate guys versus these wrestlers and these kickboxers versus these jiu-jitsu guys. I didn't know what jiu-jitsu was or submission fighting was in those days. Hoist Gracie and Ken Shamrock, and then you got this Ken Shamrock who can do all this different stuff combined, and he was probably the first true mixed martial artist out there, I would have to assume, at least in the UFC.
Yeah.
Just because he was so well-rounded. So yeah, seeing all these guys who could do all this cool stuff, and that's what drew me to find a place to train. And I started off in judo because I didn't really know. There was no Google, there was no cell phones. I couldn't just Google in mixed martial arts and find a gym. So just grabbed the yellow pages, started flipping through it. Found a judo school not too far from where I live, and I started training judo, and that's kind of how I got my start.
Okay. And did you ever compete in just judo matches at all?
My trainers wanted me to. As a pure wrestler, I was good right out of the gate. I could take down everybody in the class, the black belts and all that stuff. I could take them down real easily just if I wrestle from space and not let them grab onto my gi. So they really wanted me to compete. But, what got me out of it was a couple different things. One, my trainer wanted me to get away from wrestling, and I love wrestling. So that was the whole reason why I was in the judo room, is so I could wrestle. And he started telling me, don't shoot any more double legs. You can't use your wrestling. It's like, well, that's the only reason why I'm here. And the other thing is he would say is judo is considered the quote unquote gentleman's fighting art. It's the gentleman's fighting art. And I didn't want to learn how to fight to be a gentleman. I wanted to learn how to fight and beat the crap out of people. So there was a couple reasons why I ended up leaving the judo school.
Okay. And how did you find your next school then?
And a good buddy of mine was training at the Minnesota Martial Arts Academy, and I didn't know what the place was, but I remember he made. I saw him one night at a gathering, and he tells me about this guy he's training with, and they do this stuff called shoot wrestling, and I'm like, wait a second, shoot wrestling? That's what Ken Shamrock does. So you're at a school that trains shoot wrestling. They train shoot wrestling and they do Muay Thai kickboxing. I'm like, oh, wow, okay. So immediately I'm like, okay, when's your next class? He says Tuesdays and Thursdays. So I came in and I said, okay, let's get together Tuesday. I'm coming with you. So I went to the academy on a Tuesday and met Greg Nelson. Come to find out that Greg Nelson's a former Minnesota Gopher wrestler, Division I wrestler. He's a shoot wrestler. He's a professional kickboxer. I'm like, okay, this is exactly what I'm looking for. So that's how I found the academy. And I think I just pretty much knew I was home the second I walked in the door, just watching everybody train and having this conversation with Greg. And that was my spot. And fortunately, I was very lucky to find what would turn out to be one of the best training facilities in the country on my very first try. I didn't have to travel all over the place like a lot of guys do. I found it the first try. So that was pretty cool.
Back then, obviously this was, it wasn't as well known, MMA and stuff. So how big were the classes? How many students did he have back then?
Well, at this point in time, I'd probably say the school might have been 1,500 square feet. Mm-hmm. It was pretty small. Yeah. I mean, there was a little tiny office, there was a little bathroom and a little tiny area for changing. And then the rest of it was basically just the gym area. So I would say there might have been 30 people training per class, but it was one class at a time. So I went in there. First class they were teaching was the submission wrestling class. And, they have these little gymnastics fold out mats that they had on the floor. Now they're all ripped apart and old. You can tell they've been around, probably got them for free, hand-me-downs from some gym or something. So, and then as soon as the jiu-jitsu class, or it wasn't jiu-jitsu, sorry, as soon as the submission wrestling class was over, everybody folded up the mats, put them off to the side. Then they just trained on the bare carpet for Muay Thai. Okay. So it was very, very primitive. There was holes in the wall. Wow. We're training on bare carpet. Mm-hmm. It smelled like a dirty jockstrap. It was it just was so primitive to go into this place. But this is what I was used to wrestling from the time I was 7 years old. I was just used to this kind of, so it wasn't a big deal to me. But the classes weren't big and nobody knew what the UFC was. Nobody knew what mixed martial arts was. The term didn't even exist at that point in time. So people were there just to train and learn their craft.
Nice. So how long then from the time you started until your first fight before you decided? And was that your plan all along? I want to get into the cage and do this.
Well, I mean, at this point in time, what brought me in there originally, because I thought the UFC was cool and I wanted to train, right? I thought this was pretty cool. I did get into a lot of fights back in the day, street fights. So that was part of my motivation was to learn all these different things just to make sure I never lost a fight, because everyone I fought was bigger than me, which wasn't a big deal. So I just wanted to train for that reason, which was the wrong reason, obviously, for anybody listening to this. That's not the reason why you want to do this stuff. And I was young and dumb, so I didn't know any better. But years and years and years went by. There was no weight classes in the UFC, and there was really no small events going on. This was grassroots. This was brand new. Mm-hmm. Over time, I'd probably say, first time I stepped into the academy was probably 94. Oh, wow. And my fight was 99, I believe, or 98, somewhere around there. So many years went by, at least 4 years went by, but I wasn't consistent enough. I was hit and miss. I'd train hard for a month or two, then I would disappear for a month or two. And then I'd train hard for a month or two, disappear for a month or two. And it just came to a point where Greg said, if you want to fight, there's other guys fighting now at this point in time. Years have gone by, and now there's actually a small circuit, Extreme Challenge. And we had several guys that had fights under their belt now. And Greg says, if you want to fight, he says, you have to train 6 days a week to be on the fight team. And I was interested. So I started training 6 days a week. And about 6 months later, he says, I got a fight for you. And I took it. Nice. That's how it started.
And if Sherdog is right, your first fight was in Monoman in June of 99.
Correct.
And looks like you had 7 fights in 99. Of course, they had some of those were more than one in a day, obviously. But 7 fights between June and December of 99. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah. I wanted to be active, wanted to get good at it. So, your most experience you're going to get is going to be actually in a live situation, whether it be a cage or a ring. That's going to be the most experience you're going to get. And, tournaments were a thing back then. So I think the first 2 events I did were actually tournaments, 8-man tournaments.
Wow. Okay.
So fights several times in a day in one night within an hour time span.
I think I was at the one in Monoman. I remember going to a couple fights in Monoman back. It was before I started judging, but I went to a few fights out of Monoman. That was the first time I saw Dan Severin was out in Monoman too back in, I think that was like 97 or something, but that's crazy.
Yep.
Okay. And it looks like you had, before you had your first UFC fight, you were on a 10 fight win streak. So do you remember, first of all, where were you when you got the call about the UFC, and just kind of remember your reaction when you finally made it to the UFC?
Yeah, so it wasn't even on my radar. I didn't know that it was even being discussed, and I was actually in the gym training for a guy named Caro Parisian for a rematch with Caro, who's an absolute stud. So I'm getting ready. I'm training for a rematch with him, and the first fight I beat him by a split decision, so it was close. So get ready for that rematch, and Greg just walks in the gym, doesn't say a word to anybody, just walks in the gym and writes down, Sean Sherk versus Tiki Justin, UFC 30. And that's how I found out. Wow. Just walks in and writes it on the board, and I'm like, oh shit, okay, I'm fighting Tiki in the UFC in 10 weeks, and I got to fight Caro in 4 weeks. Okay, so I got to make this. I got to win. I got to beat Caro, obviously, because if I lose, the UFC is going to retract their offer. Oh yeah. So I still fought Caro. I didn't back out of the fight. I wanted that rematch. So everything worked out.
And nowadays, I'm guessing they probably would have said, "Don't take that other." They would have just said, "No, not if you lose. It's just you can't take another fight once you sign this contract."
Yeah,
things were a little different.
If I would have lost, my UFC fight would have been gone without a doubt. They're not going to take me. I was undefeated. I was making a big name for myself. So if I'd have went and fought Caro, I would have lost my UFC fight for sure. So I was rolling the dice, but I was confident I was going to win that fight. So I wanted that fight. I wanted some more experience before I went into the UFC, and I was confident I was going to win.
Yeah, because I'm looking at this. I mean, your first UFC fight to your second, you had like 5 other fights in between that. So yeah, it was definitely a different fight game back then, where they let you still fight other organizations while you were under UFC's contract. That's crazy.
Yeah, well, I was working a full-time job at this point in time too. So training. I wasn't able to train full-time. I had a house, a lot of bills, a vehicle. So, I was working a full-time job, and the fight thing was just kind of a secondary source of income for me. Okay. So I was trying to fight every 4 to 6 weeks, basically, and again, just gain that experience and make a little bit extra money on the side.
Yeah, because back then, I mean, like I said, I used to judge and help put on local fights and stuff. And back then, in the early 2000s, the pay wasn't great. I mean, even if it was like a big name, regionally or locally, you're talking maybe $1,000, maybe $1,500 max. A lot of them were more like $500-600 for a fight. So yeah, I
mean, I was doing 8-man tournaments for $1,000 to win it.
That's insane.
To win it. That was to win, so it was like, there was no money in this sport. You were basically paying to compete.
That is insane.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how much better it's got on the local level, at least. Probably not much better, but
over the years, I saw some locally, a few local ones made as much as $5,000 back when Chris Tuchscher was running events. I remember he had a few of the big name guys that were getting upwards of that and stuff, but that was like the headliners. That was like if you brought in a big name specifically for that or something like that. But the lower guys in the totem pole, not the non-main events, were still not making that much. So
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, at this, how many years later, I just can't imagine a lot of these guys aren't working full-time jobs just like I had to.
So talking about that, now you had a full-time job. One thing with you, everyone talked about was like your work ethic, your training regimen. And I saw, like, I know when I was training for my black belt, I had people see me at the gym and they're like, God, you're insane how hard you're working. And I've seen videos of you like training and you blew me away. So it's like, yeah. People thought I was crazy. It's like, walk us through. I mean, cause like I said, we've heard stories, we've seen videos, just like a typical day. Like if you had a fight coming and you were training like for a full day or something with your job, whatever, walk us through one of those days. Like what were you doing? Like how early you were getting up? What kind of workout stuff were you doing in a typical day?
So when I was working, I actually quit my job after I won the world title. I got a leave of absence, 6 weeks leave of absence, so I could train full time to get ready for that fight. Nice. And then when I won the fight, I quit the job. I'm like, okay, I don't need this anymore. Now my phone is ringing. I got sponsorship deals. People will hire me for appearances and seminars, so I could make a good supplemental income outside of the fight game now. So it didn't make sense to go back to work. But, well, technically that was my job, right? So when I was working a full-time job, I worked second shift from 3 to 11. So get up at like 9 o'clock in the morning, usually by eat breakfast, get to the gym by 10. Then I'd do a jiu-jitsu class from 10 to 11. Then I'd wrestle the live wrestling from 11 to 12. Then I'd jump right over and do a Muay Thai class from 1 to 2, then I would get a quick lift in, then I would go work from 3 to 11. So it was, and every day was different. There was days where I would go to and wrestle at St. Cloud State as my workout, and that was a 3-hour workout wrestling team. And then there's days I'd come in and have sparring sessions and boxing with takedown sessions. So every day was different, but essentially my training day was from 10 o'clock in the morning until about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, maybe 2:30 in the afternoon. Then I go to work from 3 to 11. And then on Saturdays, I didn't typically work Saturdays. So I would just train all day long. Basically, I trained from, 10 o'clock in the morning until probably 4 o'clock at night. That was all I did.
And then when you quit your job, did you do that same thing?
Well, then my schedule was better because I could train in the morning still. I train at 11 o'clock and I trained from 11 to 12 jiu-jitsu, and then I'd do my pad rounds. Then I'd take a little time off. I'd take a nap in my vehicle. I'd always meal prep. So I'd eat my food after my workout. Then I'd have another workout at 2, from like 2 to 4. Then I'd take a little break. Then I have another workout like from 6 to 7. So I had multiple workouts throughout the day. I was able to spread them out a little farther. Okay. Instead of going back to back to back. When I was working a full-time job, I didn't have the luxury of taking an hour nap in my truck and eating food. Right. It's basically, I'm done with my jiu-jitsu workout. I'm running right over to the other side of the room. I'm doing Muay Thai workout now. So I do, there was no break. Then as soon as I was done with that, I'd run right to the gym and I'd lift and swim or do whatever was on my routine for the day. So I had no time, and I'd have to eat in my vehicle from one place to the next. I'd eat my food in my vehicle again, because I didn't have any the luxury of having extra time wasn't on my hands. Whereas when I was making this a full-time job, I could take, hour and a half, 2-hour break between workouts and eat and rest and maybe even take a nap in my truck.
Wow. And walk us through that first title win.
Against Kenny?
Yeah.
So, there was a lot of adversity going into that fight. A lot of people may or may not know this, but I tore my right shoulder about 6, maybe 7 days before the fight. Completely tore, a slap tear, complete tear in my right shoulder. So that posed a lot of problems because it was unbelievably painful. And, I just didn't have any mobility or any strength in my arm, my right arm. I'm right-handed. So losing strength and mobility in the right hand is kind of a big deal. And doing it, 6-7 days before a fight, I don't really have time to get it fixed or heal it properly. I had to go in there and fight with a torn shoulder. So a lot of adversity going into that fight, and obviously a lot of adversity during the fight because I got elbowed in the head and he cut me open. He has really sharp elbows. He's known for elbowing people and cutting them. So hit me with a good elbow and cut me open, and now I'm bleeding like a stuck pig, and I got a torn shoulder. So a lot of adversity, but fortunately I was able to just kind of grind it out and get my hand raised at the end of the day.
That's cool. And I'm looking here. You also fought in Pride a few times.
Yeah, I fought in Pride one time.
One time. Okay.
I fought in Pancrase once, and that was a one and done thing. And then I fought in Pride again. That was a one and done. I didn't want to go back to Pancrase because I didn't like the way I was treated over there.
Okay.
You know, I sprained my ankle in that fight within the first 15 seconds, and I fought a 15-minute fight with a sprained ankle, and it was pretty bad by the end of the fight. You know, it was bad to the point where I couldn't walk, and they put me into a room way in the back somewhere, and they left me in there for like 40 minutes. Nobody speaks English. The doctor was off doing something else. He couldn't tend to me, and I just literally sat in this room just in excruciating pain because my ankle was so bad. And then they gave me a draw. I beat the crap out of the dude for 15 minutes. I was on top of him for 14 minutes out of those 15, just pounding the crap out of him. I don't even know if the guy hit me once. Had 0 submission attempts, took me down 0 times, and they gave me a draw. So I was not willing to go back to Pancrase, and I actually told my manager at that time, don't ever schedule me another fight in Japan again. I won't do that.
Really?
So fast forward many years down the road, UFC cut me after I got beat by Matt Hughes, my first loss of my career, and they dropped me. So the second biggest show in the world is Pride. Actually, I think Pride might have been considered the biggest fight in the world, promotion in the world at that point in time. So of course we reach out to Pride. Okay, well, I'm one of the top guys in the world, and I just fought for a world title and got this great resume, and Pride signed me to a 1-fight deal. So again, I went in and just beat the crap out of their champion, King of Rings champion. This guy was, so he was good, had a lot of experience, and I just beat the snot out of this dude and put a really good show on. And the promoters were excited. They brought me up to their room afterwards, wanted to meet me firsthand, which is a really good sign, you know. So I thought for sure they were going to re-sign me. And they offered me a couple fight deal, but the money was just garbage. And they wanted like a year contract, you know, not very much money, where I wouldn't even be able to pay my bills. They weren't going to let me fight outside of their organization. Like the UFC let me fight outside their organization. If they said, hey, you're fighting Matt Hughes in 5 months, and I'm like, well, I need to pay my bills. Can I fight outside? Can I fight some other promotions in the meantime? They would let me do that at my own risk, of course. Well, Pride says you can't. So anyway, I didn't go back to Pride. You know, I didn't go back. It just, I couldn't do it. You know, I wouldn't be able to pay my bills with what they were offering me. So I never went back to Pride. But I mean, all in all, the experience was great, though. I mean, Pride, they put on a really good show, and I didn't have the same experience in Pride as I had in Pancrase. You know, they were A+ as far as how they treat their fighters.
Oh, and Pride used to sell out in Japan. They were selling out 90,000 seat stadiums, where the UFC is a sellout's like 15,000. So I mean, it's a big difference. So
yeah, I fought at the Tokyo Dome.
Wow.
There, I don't know how many people were there, but that crowd, it was a full house, and there was a lot of people in that audience. So that was a pretty cool experience.
Is it true that I was reading somewhere that is it the Japanese fans that gave you the nickname the Muscle Shark?
Yeah, that's where I got it.
That is cool.
Yeah.
So did that just come? Was it like a newspaper article that came out after your fight, or just the fans started calling you? How did that happen?
So I think that was my nickname before I went over there. It must have been. I didn't know that, obviously. So there's a funny story here. So as I'm fighting this guy over in Japan, you know, Pride is televised all over the world. So you can, and the crowd is super quiet. They're like really quiet. You know, if a big action takes place, they just clap their hands, they ooh and they ah, but they're not hollering and screaming. So you can hear a pin drop. I mean, it is quiet in there. And I can hear all these announcers talking, which is really strange. I can hear like the French and the Japanese and the Spanish. And for some reason, Boss Rutan's voice just kept cutting through, because it probably was the only English voice I could understand. And I don't know why, but I could hear him talking about the fight, like commentating. And he kept talking about Muscle Shark this, Muscle Shark that. I didn't know who the Muscle Shark was. So as I'm hearing him talk about this Muscle Shark guy, I'm like getting frustrated, because I'm putting on quite the show and I'm beating the crap out of this guy. And I'm in my head, I'm thinking to myself, why does he keep talking about this Muscle Shark dude? You know, who's this guy he's talking about? I'm beating this guy's ass. He should be talking about me. Well, after the fight's over, Boss comes over and does a post-fight interview, and he goes, so what do you think about the Japanese fans nicknaming you Muscle Shark? And I'm like, oh, fuck. He was talking about me. Okay. So
Nice.
That's how I found out about the name Miss Muscle Shark.
That's funny.
Yeah, maybe somebody told me that was my nickname before the fight, so I would have not gotten so angry.
That's cool. So, I mean, I don't know how many fans realize this, but looking at your record, I mean, 4 career losses, and your only losses are to Matt Hughes, George St. Pierre, BJ Penn, and Frankie Edgar. I mean, holy shit, dude. I don't know. Do people realize how freaking impressive that is? That is so cool.
Yeah, I mean, the hardcore fan would understand that, but the average warrior guy, especially this day and age, seems like when I retired, nobody really cares, but the hardcore fan would understand. Yeah, I mean, 4 losses over the course of 12 years, and I only lost the UFC World Champions and Hall of Famers.
Yeah,
so not a bad.
Yeah, and you mentioned retiring, and I read somewhere that after you retired, you had like zero interest of teaching and opening a school or anything, just teaching something that never interested you at all, or why did you pretty much kind of just stepped away from the sport when you retired?
Yeah, I just never had interest in being a teacher. I really don't know why, but it just wasn't my passion. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't willing to chase something that I wasn't passionate about, especially, I know a lot of people who own gyms, and there's a lot of gyms that fail. So I wasn't willing to roll the dice on something I wasn't passionate about, and especially if there was a high likelihood that it would end up failing. So I just decided to do what a lot of fighters don't do, and not only retire on a high note, but walk away from the sport and completely reinvent myself. I used the same business model and the same thought process that made me successful in the fight game. I used that same model in the business world, and I was able to be really successful in a lot of different business ventures over the course of the last 12 years.
That's cool. Congrats on that.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, you mentioned earlier, 2 sons that wrestle. If one of your sons came up to you and said, "Hey, Dad, I want to do MMA. I want to, try to get into the UFC," would, with your knowledge and what and the knowledge of the fight game, would you encourage that? Would you discourage that?
My youngest has been telling me he's going to fight mixed martial arts since he was about 4.
Nice.
And he's been boxing. He's been wrestling since he was 4. He's probably got 16 state and national wrestling titles at this point in time. He just took 3rd at nationals this year, junior college nationals this year. So he's a tough wrestler, and he's also been boxing since he was probably 4. So the kid can throw hands, and he can wrestle, and he's tough as nails, and
nice. And
he's dead set on being a mixed martial artist. And he tells me all the time, he says, "Dad, we're going to be the first father-son UFC world champions in history." So hopefully that's true. That'd be pretty cool.
Did you coach him, do you think? Even though you said you never wanted to teach, would you coach your son?
Oh, of course. Yeah, I've been coaching and mentoring my kids since they were born, as far as wrestling and just life in general. Nice. So it'd be fun to do that. And all of his boxing knowledge comes from me, because we've got a boxing room in the basement, so we do box on a regular basis.
Very cool.
Timing spar, pad work, heavy bag, punch, kick, knee, elbow. So he's very well versed with stand up. As far as supporting them goes, yeah, for 100%, I'll teach him, I'll coach him, I'll find him the best coaches and the best training partners in the world, and try to get him on a path to win a world title.
Nice. Well, you got to tell him when he wins his world title, he's got to come do the podcast, and I can be the first father-son world champions on my podcast. So.
Yeah. Many years down the road.
Yeah. Yes, hey, hopefully the show will still be going. We'll see.
Yeah.
So over your 12-year career, who, not counting your losses, the 4 losses, who was your toughest fight? Who was your toughest win?
That's a hard question, because I fought so many great fighters mm-hmm. who have posed so many different problems in so many different areas. Benji Radek, I'd say probably one of the hardest hitters that I faced. He just was. I mean, the guy hit like a mule kick. Then you got somebody like trying to think who else, like Diaz. He posed a lot of problems with his ground game, and his takedown defense was really good. And then you got a guy like Carl Parisian that poses all kinds of different problems. And, I fought so many great fighters over the years, and not everybody poses the same problems or the same risks. So you got to kind of assess each individual at their own strengths and weaknesses. So I'd probably say Carl. I mean, honestly, he was probably one of my hardest wins, or Diaz was probably one of my hardest wins.
I'm trying to look through the list. Was Carl the only one you fought twice, or was there anyone else you fought more than once?
Carl's the only one one I fought, I fought a local guy named Johnny Alexander twice, and then Carl Parisian I fought twice.
Okay. So throughout your life, whether it's, something you learned from sports, something you learned from fighting, whatever, but is there one philosophy that's just super important to you? It's at the top of your list?
Yeah, I always say there's no substitute for hard work.
Nice.
It doesn't matter. I didn't make this philosophy up, obviously. This has been said millions of times over the years, but I just know for a fact that the harder you work, the more you're going to succeed. And that is true in every aspect of your life, not just as a competitor, but, as a business person as well.
Nice. Do you see yourself ever going back into maybe like a traditional martial arts training? Maybe not to compete? Would that? No, just completely?
Nah.
Okay.
No, I lift weights. I do a circuit train. And when my kid starts competing, I'll be training with him, obviously. But as far as me training martial arts, I don't need to. I'm perfectly content with what I did, and not only that, but my body's really beat up. I need a lot of surgeries, and I just really tore my body to shreds trying to train hard and win world titles. That's what I felt like I had to do. So, with my hips being torn and my shoulders are torn and my neck's got bulge disc and a slip disc in my neck. And it's like, training, it hurts.
Yeah.
And it doesn't just hurt while I'm doing it. It hurts for several days afterwards. So I just made a decision a long time ago that I'd rather just not be in pain.
That makes sense. So what do you think the worst injury was?
Probably say at this point in time, probably my neck.
Yeah.
I've got 2 bulge discs and 2 slip discs, and then my curvature is partially reversed, and I've got pinched nerve and arthritis. So that's probably what I'd say it gives me the most issues on a regular basis.
That's crazy. So as a diehard UFC fan, someone you watched it from the beginning like me, are you thinking just overall, are you more a fan, just as a fan, of the original UFC, like the first 20, 30 events where there was, almost no rules, style versus style, tournaments, or are you more a fan of what it is today?
Well, that's a hard question because I haven't watched UFC in 12 years. I don't know who any of these guys are.
Okay.
And I'm sure the sport's evolved substantially since I've retired.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say as far as a fan base goes, I was actually a fan back in the early days. That's what got me into it.
Yeah.
But what I have more respect for is probably what the guys are doing now. True mixed martial artists who can fight from any position and they got no weaknesses. So,
yeah.
I'd probably say as a fan, I would appreciate today's fighters over the, 30 years ago.
Yeah. I know over the years of MMA, one of the most controversial topics is the weight cutting. And there's been a push in some organizations to try to do like the weigh-ins the day of. So fighters are more forced to fight at their walking around weight instead of their fight weight. What are your thoughts on something like that?
If I was competing, I wouldn't like that at all. That's part of the deal. It would be a good way to stop guys from cutting 20 or 30 pounds because you can't compete on the same day when you're cutting 20 pounds.
Yeah.
So it'll stop the guys from the big weight cuts. But as an athlete and competitor, I cut 20 pounds to make 155. I was cutting 5 pounds to make 170. So wow. I would have tremendously benefited at 170, whereas at 155, I would have not benefited at all. I would have been in trouble. I probably wouldn't have been able to fight 155 if it was the same day weigh-in.
If they did that, and let's say you were forced basically to fight at 170, then do you think you would have had the same success at 170 as you did at 155?
Well, I fought I probably had 37 fights at 170.
Oh, you did? Okay.
And yeah. I fought Man Hughes for a world title at 170.
Okay.
And I fought George St. Pierre and Nick Diaz. And I had, off the top of my head, I think I was 35-2 at 170.
Wow.
And that's walking around at 175.
Okay.
These guys are coming down from 190 to 200 pounds. So again, if we're talking same day weigh-in,
mm-hmm.
You weigh in a few hours before, I'm cutting 5 pounds, you're cutting 20. I've got a huge advantage at 170, even bigger than I already felt like I had.
Yeah. See, so my thought, and maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm just looking at it wrong. Cause like I said, I've never fought. I've never been a fighter. I didn't wrestle, but like in my opinion, then the guys who were cutting the 20 should be fighting at like 190 or 195 instead of 170. That's kind of how I look at it. And maybe I'm looking at it wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it happens in every sport.
Yeah.
Where has to be weight allowances, though. I mean, the same thing happens in wrestling with my kids.
Mm-hmm.
You got to find that fine line, because you compete like an hour and a half after you weigh in. You have to compete. I think it's more like 2 hours after weigh-ins.
Okay.
So you get these guys that are cutting 20 pounds, and they got to compete 2 hours after weigh-ins, and they can barely wrestle a period and a half without completely gassing out.
Wow.
Then you get, my boys are kind of right in that perfect area where they're only cutting 5 to 7. So they're not small for the weight class, and their weight cut's not hurting them either. So they can actually perform a lot better. So, it just depends on what each individual athlete wants to do and how much they want to cut. And then you got to get your recovery down and be able to perform on competition day. You can cut all the weight you want to, but if you can't perform when it's time to perform, then, what's the point?
Yeah. No, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. So when you were fighting, did you have a specific walk-up song? Did you change it throughout your career? What was your walk-up music?
I walked out to a song called Wait by Earshot.
Okay.
So that was my walkout song. I heard it on a highlight video. I had a guy make a highlight video for me, and he just happened to put this song on there, and I thought it was awesome. It fit, and then he made a couple adjustments to it where the beginning of the song, it was the Jaws theme, and then it busted into the music. So that's what I walked out to.
So let's say you were gonna fight today. Would you use the same song, or would you try to find something new?
Nope, it'd be the same exact song. So even today, it's kind of funny, like, music brings back a lot of memories, different types of music and songs. So even today, like if I'm driving down the road and that song comes on the radio, I start flashing back. Like I turn it up, and next thing you know, I'm going 80 miles an hour down the highway, and I'm grabbing onto the steering wheel like I'm going to rip it off. And I catch myself from time to time, and I just start having these flashbacks, and I'm visualizing myself walking out to the cage and fighting somebody. And it's kind of weird how that still happens after all these years.
So what about what you said? You still lift weights and stuff. So is that song in your rotation for listening to when you're lifting weights?
No, I don't overplay it.
Okay.
I don't overplay it just because of the fact that I don't ever want to get sick and tired of it. I always want it to have special meaning.
Makes sense.
So I probably don't listen to it too often, but it's not.
What kind of stuff do you listen to?
80s rock or just 90s rock.
I like it. All right, cool. I got some fun questions we use to wrap up the interview. This one, it doesn't have to be 4 names. It can be as few as 2 and as many as 8, just kind of up to you. But 3, 4, 5 names that you'd put on your personal Mount Rushmore of martial arts or Mount Rushmore of MMA, kind of however you want to.
I'd say Randy Couture.
Nice.
George St. Pierre, Anderson Silva, and John Jones.
Okay, that's solid, man. That's a good one. All right, these next ones you may have answers for, you may not. Kind of depends on the guest. But do you have a favorite martial arts book?
Never read a martial arts book before.
Okay, so let me ask you this: let's say they decide to make the movie, the Sean Sherk story. Going by like today's actors and stuff, who do you want to play you in the movie? Would you want like a big name or an unknown?
I'd say Mark Wahlberg.
Oh yeah, I could picture that actually.
It's funny as I get a lot of people over the years that have tell me I look like him. I don't think I do, but it's a huge compliment because I think the guy's a total badass. So It's a huge compliment, but I think it'd be pretty cool if he played me in the movie.
I could see that. That could be kind of cool. All right. How about a favorite martial arts video game? Did you ever get into gaming?
Never played a martial arts video game. I played the UFC video game a couple times.
Yeah.
But no, I've never really gotten into those. I guess I'd say old school stuff. When I was younger, I used to play Tekken a lot.
I love Tekken so much. That's such a fun game.
Yeah, I'd probably say Tekken, I guess, old school stuff.
Okay. How about a martial arts TV show?
Oh boy, I don't know if I've ever watched one before. I don't think I've ever watched. I don't typically watch anything that has to do with mixed martial arts. I don't watch it on TV. I don't watch movies that have to do with it.
Really?
I guess when I retired, I just decided to walk away and ride off into the sunset and be done with it. So
any of that jump out from when you were younger, like a Highlander, Walker, Texas Ranger, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, shows like that?
Oh man, I don't know. I'd say actually one of my favorite movies of all time is Vision Quest, which is a wrestling movie.
Yes.
So I would say that would be qualified, maybe in my opinion, as a martial arts show.
Oh, definitely that. And you are the first person to ever, and I'm actually shocked no one's ever picked that before. Because I've actually had a lot of guys with wrestling backgrounds. I was just talking to someone about that movie like yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Is that I think it's only like the first, or maybe only the second movie made about wrestling. I think it was the first one made about wrestling. There was one that came out a couple years ago that was based on a true story that I saw. It was about I think Cole Hauser was in it. It was actually a decent movie. Now it's going to drive me crazy. I got to look it up because I got to remember.
Yeah, Vision Quest, I think, as far as my knowledge, it was the first movie ever made about wrestling.
I think so.
And
I think it was.
And in my opinion, it just happens to be the best one.
I need to rewatch that. I know I have it on DVD. Yeah, there's one called The Last Champion that came out 5 years ago in 2019 or 2020. And I think it's based on a true story. But
okay.
Probably not as good as Vision Quest, but you'd probably enjoy it with your background. It's a good movie.
Yeah, I might have seen it actually.
Okay.
Yeah, but even the theme song for Vision Quest, Lunatic Fringe.
Yep.
That was the song that was always in my headphones. So I walked out to wait by earshot over over the big loudspeaker for everyone else to hear. Mm-hmm. But in my headphones, I had my headphones on, was Lunatic Fringe. So nice. that was the song I listened to before I fought.
That's awesome. I might actually rewatch that this weekend because it's probably been about 20 years since I watched Vision Quest. So
yeah,
that's cool. All right, this one can be any movie. You said your favorite movie of all time, but any movie you've seen in your whole life, just a favorite movie fight scene. Is there just one fight scene that stands out? And I've had people pick anything from like Star Wars to Marvel to Rocky. I mean, anything.
Oh, there's boy, this is going to drive me nuts because I can't think of the name of the movie. Guy plays a special agent. Shoot, it's going to bother the heck out of me now. But there's a huge fight scene in a church that takes place. And boy, I think Samuel Jackson's in this movie too, if I remember right. Darn it. I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the movie. But anyway, that would be my favorite fight scene. Sorry, I don't remember the name of it though.
I know Kingsman, there's a big fight scene in the church. Is that the one?
Yes, that's the one. Yes.
Okay, that is a good scene.
That scene's awesome. I mean, when I first saw it, I rewinded it probably about 10 times, and I was like, "This some pretty cool special effects."
Yeah, see, I did I did that with the fight scene in Matt Damon, The Bourne Identity. The scene when he's on that park bench and the cops wake him up, and he like takes out both cops in like 5 seconds. I think I rewatched that like 30 times.
Yeah,
that's
awesome.
When you find a good scene, man, you gotta pick it out. But nice. Yeah. So what are you doing now? I mean, since you retired, what keeps you busy nowadays other than kids?
I own a real estate business, so
Nice.
I started buying and selling and flipping a couple years after I retired from mixed martial arts.
Very cool.
So I've been doing that for 12 years, and I range anywhere from 8 to 15 houses a year. Typically, I did 22 last year. Last year was a good year.
Wow.
So real estate business. Then I also work for a company named Advanced Roofing. We're located right here in Oak Grove, kind of by where I live. Mm-hmm. And I do sales and contracting for them.
Okay.
So I've been doing that for about 4 years. So
nice.
Pretty much got 2 jobs.
Okay.
So I'm busy.
Yeah. So when you do the house flipping, do you do a lot of the work yourself or do you contract that out?
I used to do all of it myself until I started doing the contracting and sales for Advanced Roofing.
Okay.
Flipping was my full-time job. And I had a house, I had them backed up. So I was working on houses 6 days a week, pretty much all year because I always had flips going on. So I got really good at it. I got really good at knowing how to remodel houses and being able to walk in and into a house and estimate what my rehab costs were going to be, how much it's going to cost to sell the house, how much the house was going to be worth, the resale value, and then dictating how much my profit was going to be. So I got real good at that stuff by being able to go into houses and do the work myself. What happened was in 2020, my real estate business was destroyed. I was forced to go on lockdown. All the real estate market basically just died instantly overnight. Mm-hmm. So that's what got me into the sales with Advanced Roofing.
Okay.
A buddy of mine owns the company, and he's asking me for years to come work for him. So that was just good timing. So I came in and started doing sales for him, and turns out I'm pretty good at it and ended up being really successful at that. But my goal was to get the real estate thing back on track too, and then just do both.
Okay.
So at this point in time, I'll do tear outs and stuff like that, but then otherwise I just have subs and contractors do the work. I don't have time to be on job sites every day like I used to.
Yeah. So if you were approached by a network and said, we want to follow you around and do a reality-based TV show based on your house flipping, like all the ones out there, would you do that, you think?
Yeah, of course.
Nice.
That'd be fun. Actually trying out for a casting call many years ago. This is probably 10 years ago, so I wasn't far out of my fight career at this point in time. But I answered a casting call for a reality TV show, house flipping show.
Really?
Did a walkthrough on one of my houses, filmed the video, and put together this little sketch and stuff like that. And it's kind of sad because the response was, "Yeah, you're good, and we like you, but you're not what we're looking for." I said, "What do you mean I'm not what you're looking for? I've already got the name and everything, you know. I'm going to bring fans in just based on my mixed martial arts career alone."
Yeah.
And they said, we're looking for either a person of color or a female. So I'm
geez.
Oh, wow. So I was discriminated against. So I'm like, all right, whatever, guys. So that's what happened.
You should just do your own and put it on YouTube, man. Do like champion house flipping or something like that. It'd be kind of cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I'm excited that you're complete 180 from your fight career, and you're still having success in what you're doing, and everything's going well. And I'm so happy for that. That's really awesome to see.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. The thing is I've said this many times over the years is, being at the pinnacle of one industry and having it all figured out and being at the top of the hill and then having to walk away from that and start from complete scratch in the industry that you don't know anything about. It's scary. Like I was scared. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what my future's going to hold. So, I was concerned. But I just figured if I put the same effort and thought process and goal setting and just work my ass off, I could be successful at it. So was my learning lesson basically is you just got to work hard and you can be successful at anything. But it was a scary transition to make though, for sure. And I know a lot of athletes go through the same thing. So I don't know what their journeys are. And I see a lot of people stay in the same industry, whether it be gyms or commentating.
Yeah. Seriously, man, continued success. I love it. And this has been so much fun. Like I said, I met you like once or twice, probably 20 some years ago at one of Brock's events, and never really got to chat much, but I've learned so much about you, and I've seriously enjoyed this. And I think the listeners are really going to love it, but I truly appreciate your time. And this has been a blast.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist. We hope you will join us every week for a brand new episode with a different martial artist telling their story. If you enjoy the show, be sure to leave us a review. Also, be sure to check out our website at everydaymartialartist.com. There you can find all of our episodes and contact us to suggest guests and ask questions. Again, thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist, and we'll see you next week.
This podcast is a production of Unfiltered Studios. If you would like to know more about joining Unfiltered Studios, please visit our website at unfpod.com for more information.